Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Pinniped Monitoring Training 2026.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Martini Lamb, Environmental Resources Manager or Division Manager at Sonoma Water. I've also been working on the Russian River Estuary Management Project as a biologist and project manager since 1998. So this is a project that um, is important to me personally and important to Sonoma Water, and we so appreciate everybody's time and energy helping to monitor the Pinniped haul out at the mouth of the Russian River. So I'm going to give a little bit of background about the Estuary Management Project, and then I'm also going to talk about the Marine Mammal Protection Act. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Russian River Estuary, the estuary is basically where the river and the Pacific Ocean meet and intermingle to create sort of a unique environment. The tidal extent of the Russian River Estuary is from the mouth of the river at the Pacific Ocean, approximately 7 miles upstream to near Austin Creek. So that's the area that we consider the estuary, and is typically experiencing sort of the tidal changes um, that occur every day. When the river mouth closes, which results from ocean waves depositing sand that is offshore, underwater in bars, large ocean waves will pick up that sand and move it and build the beach and actually close the river mouth under certain circumstances. And when the river mouth closes, that results in a lagoon forming behind that barrier beach. And as that lagoon rises, because the river is still flowing into into the lagoon, and ocean waves are contributing water into the lagoon, the water levels come up and threaten to flood low-lying properties along the river. So when the lagoon forms, it actually creates a backwatering effect that can be seen all the way up to Vacation Beach. So essentially doubling the size of the estuary and lagoon. So our Russian River Estuary Management Project was first started to really address the when the river mouth closes, minimizing the flood risk that uh, is uh, faced by low-lying properties. Um, but that project has evolved over time, and we really now have these dual objectives of minimizing flood risk and enhancing habitat conditions for salmonids. So the way that Sonoma Water manages or to minimize that flood risk is by artificially breaching the closed barrier beach after it forms. And to the left, you'll see a map of Goat Rock State Beach. Um, on the sort of south side of the beach, there is a remnant jetty. Sometimes you can see portions of it exposed. Um, but that jetty kind of helps fortify the beach, and the beach basically stays kind of put in that in its current condition there all the time. And the river mouth actually migrates from north to south uh, on the north side of the jetty groin or the concrete cap that you can see out there. And so that's where the barrier beach forms. And if needed, Sonoma Water will go and use a piece of equipment like an excavator to create what we call a pilot channel and artificially breach the river mouth in order to minimize that flood risk. So on the left here, you'll see another photo of the barrier beach. Um, and that beach can be really low and wide. It can be really tall and narrow. It really depends on what river mouth conditions are like at the time that it closes. And as once it closes, the ocean continues to build the beach. Um, so there are times of when Sonoma Water is unable to actually do a beach management activity, and the circumstances that occur following a river mouth closure where we cannot do beach management increases the flood risk, particularly around the community of Jenner, but all the way up to Vacation Beach. So the photos on the right are, I think they're taken in December when ocean waves were so big it was unsafe for us to have our staff and crews out on the barrier beach because ocean waves were actually breaking over the top of the beach. And you'll see at the top the post office in downtown Jenner, sort of completely surrounded by water from the lagoon, and the southbound lane of Highway 1 closed. So that's at about a 12-foot water surface elevation. And you also see on the bottom right photo of some of the structures in Jenner that begin to experience flooding at those higher water surface elevations. So I mentioned this dual objective for managing the artificial breaching program to minimize flood risk, but we have this dual objective to also try to enhance conditions for salmonids related to our beach management activities. And really, people always wonder like why do we have these objectives? And the estuary habitat is really important habitat for salmon and steelhead. So Sonoma Water became involved in beach management and managing flood risk in the estuary in the mid 1990s. Previously, the county managed the barrier beach, and individual citizens would go out and periodically breach it with shovels. Um, but Sonoma Water became involved in the mid 90s at a time just before salmon and steelhead were listed as endangered and threatened under the Federal Endangered Species Act. So there are three species that are listed in Sonoma County and in the Russian River watershed: coho salmon, Chinook salmon, and steelhead. And coho salmon are also listed under the California Endangered Species Act. But the estuary environment creates this opportunity for juveniles that enter the estuary in the spring and early summer. And those species, particularly steelhead juveniles and coho juveniles, that spend time rearing or growing in the estuary in those summer months, they come into the estuary really not acclimated to the saline environment in the ocean. So they spend some time growing in the estuary. And because the estuary is such a productive environment, it's abundant in invertebrates that they rely on for their food source. They're able to grow very rapidly in the estuary environment. So on the left, you'll see some photos of younger salmon that entered the estuary and were captured. And then on the right, you will see photos of some of the individuals because we tag these fish. If we recapture them, we're able to see how quickly they have grown and how much they've grown between the first time that we captured them and the second time or even third time that we've captured them. And we see that they grow up to a millimeter a day in the estuary, which is about the maximum growth rate that you might expect for a juvenile salmon to grow. So we really want to try to manage our flood risk management activities to try to enhance the habitat that these fish are relying on to grow in the estuary in the summer and fall months in particular. So for those of you that have been part of our volunteer team for a long time, you may remember that we received what's called a biological opinion back in 2008 that really helped modify our management program to target enhancing habitat conditions for salmonids. And that biological opinion that was issued by National Marine Fisheries Service under the Federal Endangered Species Act actually expired in 2023. And we've been working with National Marine Fisheries Service and the Army Corps of Engineers to update that biological opinion. And NIMS issued a new biological opinion in the spring of 2025, so last year. So that biological opinion evaluated the estuary adaptive management approach that we've been taking to manage this flood risk and enhance habitat for salmonids. Um, so under this new biological opinion, which has a 10-year time frame, we're going to continue our flood risk management activities following river mouth closures, but we're really emphasizing looking at water quality based habitat in the estuary. So when the estuary closes and forms the lagoon, what does the water quality in the lagoon look like? And how does that affect the habitat that salmon juveniles are primarily juveniles, but even adults are experiencing, and trying to optimize those conditions based on which species and what life stage they're at the time that the estuary is closed. So we have to consider when the estuary closes lots of different changing conditions. So the river that flows that are coming into the lagoon, rain, how much waves are contributing salt water into the lagoon condition, what does the beach height and width look like, which salmon species and which life stages are present at the estuary. And based on all of those conditions, make a decision with the management team that we have that includes Sonoma Water and a number of resource management state and federal agencies to determine at what water elevations we're going to attempt to do a breaching, so that we can try to optimize the habitat for salmonids for as long as possible before we reach a flood risk stage. So I know that's a lot and probably kind of complicated explanation, but that's sort of the nutshell version of the estuary approach that we're going to be taking under the new biological opinion. We will be continuing to do the biological and physical monitoring that we have been doing. So we'll continue to monitor salmonids in the estuary and their timing of arrival and where they're occurring within the estuary. A new monitoring activity that we will be doing under the next biological opinion is actually monitoring and mapping aquatic vegetation. So this is the vegetation that grows beneath the surface of the water. We're really trying to look at where eelgrass occurs in sort of very limited places in the estuary and tracking how that changes over time. We'll continue to monitor pinnipeds, which you all are here for today. And then we'll continue our water quality monitoring throughout the estuary. So we're monitoring both physical conditions to monitor habitat for salmonids and human health in the estuary. We also monitor things like nutrients and bacteria in the estuary, as well as algae and cyanobacteria in the lower river near Monterey and Rio Grande. And then we will also continue to monitor physical processes such as the beach building. We do monthly topographic surveys of the beach to monitor how the beach changes over time. And all of that monitoring activity, because it occurs within an area where marine mammals are present, we are monitoring the effects of those activities under the Marine Mammal Protection Act on marine mammals in the estuary. And then I'll just briefly touch on one other new key point of the biological opinion for our estuary management program is that we are going to be developing habitat enhancement projects within the estuary over the next 10 years, um, really to help offset the effects of breaching on salmonid habitats in the estuary. So there's two types of enhancements that we're going to be evaluating and undertaking. One is 3 to 5 acres of floodplain habitat restoration. So this could be anything from creating new tidal channels that juvenile salmon might occupy to aquatic vegetation enhancements. So somewhere within the main part of the estuary or perhaps Willow Creek, um, we're going to be looking at restoring 3 to 5 acres of habitat. And then we're also going to be locating what we call LWD or large woody debris structures, 2 to 4 locations within the main part of the estuary. And these structures are really to provide cover, mostly for adult salmonids that are migrating into the river in the fall and in the winter. But they could also be used by juvenile salmonids that are entering the estuary early in the spring and in the summer. And we'll be starting our enhancement activities with a couple of years of feasibility studies. We're really going to be focused on looking at some habitat concepts that we already have and determining if where there might be feasible. So looking at things in terms of like constructability, but also land ownership. Um, and then one of the most important things is really looking at how these habitat enhancement locations will perform long term in the face of sea level rise. So we really want to make sure that the resources that we put into habitat enhancement for these salmonids will function long term with changing water quality due to sea level rise. So I think we can take questions on the habitat or the estuary management program at the end. I'm going to quickly talk about the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Um, so the Marine Mammal Protection Act is a federal law that prohibits taking marine mammals unless it's under a permit or otherwise exempted. And it authorizes what is called incidental taking. So this is sort of indirect kind of effects that occur under permitted activities. I'll talk a little bit about what the definitions of those are next. So the Marine Mammal Protection Act defines take as harassing, hunting, capturing, or killing, or attempting to do any of those things to a marine mammal. And harassment is defined as any act of pursuit or tormenting or annoyance of marine mammals that has the potential to either injure or disrupt the behavioral patterns of marine mammals. And the Marine Mammal Protection Act allows for permits that describe what the permissible methods of take are for an activity. And the permits require that the least practicable adverse impact on species in their habitat are implemented. It requires mitigation measures if there is a potential for adverse impact, and they include monitoring and reporting requirements. So Sonoma Water holds a Marine Mammal Protection Act permit for our beach management activities, so all of the artificial breaching activities that we do, but also all of the monitoring activities that we do in and around the estuary that have the potential for harassing harbor seals, California sea lions, or elephant seals. Our permit only covers level B harassment. We do not have take coverage for level A that would result from an injury, for example. So our permit also includes minimization measures and the monitoring that we all undertake. and then the reporting requirements. I mentioned this earlier, the activities that are included in our permit. Um, and then our Pinniped monitoring program is undertaken under a Pinniped monitoring plan that's required by our Marine Mammal Protection Act permit. This was developed by Sonoma Water and Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods. And the monitoring plan really focuses on the key questions of the population dynamics at the Goat Rock or Jenner Haulout, and then identifies the monitoring methods that we utilize for both baseline monitoring and then the monitoring activities associated with our beach management activities and monitoring activities that have the potential to impact harbor seals in particular. The methods that we use for monitoring are and are identified in our monitoring plan are based on previous monitoring efforts. So those of you that are new to this program, we have a long-standing monitoring history of the haul out at the mouth of the Russian River at Goat Rock State Beach. It started with the Stewards program, which is an ongoing program called Seal Watch. But then we also had some local scientists and citizen scientists, Dr. Joe Mortensen and Eleanor Toohey, who undertook very long-standing monitoring of the river mouth, but also and the harbor seal haul out at the river mouth. Eleanor Toohey was a resident that lived in Jenner, right near the river mouth, and she would go out every single day and take a photograph and document the pinnipeds at the river mouth. And then Dr. Mortensen, he worked with us here on this program, but he monitored the seals and their behavior at a number of sites, including the Jenner haul out. And then Sonoma Water, we've been monitoring the harbor seal haul out. We started monitoring in the mid 90s when we took on beach management. And then again since 2008. And we've been monitoring before, during, and after our breaching activities. In the mid 90s, Dr. Mortensen led that effort. And then after that, our Sonoma Water staff have been leading that effort. So the goals and objectives under our current pinniped monitoring program, really to monitor the response of the harbor seals that are hauled out at the river mouth. Haul out, as well as the births and production of pups at the haul out. And then we report these results to all the resource agencies that we work with, but including the National Marine Fisheries Service and the public. Our baseline monitoring schedule. So for these are just the regular baseline weekly surveys that we do are from March 15th to October 15th. But we also monitor around any of our artificial breaching activities. So we'll do monitoring before, the day before, but up to 3 days before, and then the day of and the day after artificial breaching activities. So our baseline monitoring methods at Goat Rock State Beach are 2 surveys per month from March to mid-October. During the pupping season, can start in mid-March, but it's usually in April and May. We're doing weekly surveys, and we're counting the number of seals, and we're also documenting the disturbances to the harbor seals. And then our beach management monitoring activities, we follow the same methods of seal counts and documenting disturbances that occur during our baseline monitoring. So there's no change to the methods that we use there. Um, During the pupping season from mid-March to the end of June, we do have mitigation measures and avoidance measures that we have in place to make sure that we avoid and minimize impacts to neonates. So these are pups that are less than a week old. And if they occur within the area of work or artificial breaching, um, we will delay our beach management activities until the pup has left or the latest day possible to prevent flooding. So unless flooding is imminent, we are not trying, we're trying to avoid doing any beach management when harbor seal pups are present. Um, we also, during the pupping season, we cannot do beach management activities on the beach um, more than 2 consecutive days. So it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally um, after an artificial breaching, the river mouth will close again within like hours or a day or two. Um, and in those circumstances in the past, we would go out and do another beach management activity. Um, these measures basically are in place to make sure that we're not going day after day doing beach management, but trying to extend that out to avoid impacting neonates. We also have a 7-day no work period between our beach management activities during the pupping season. And I think our Sonoma Andy will also cover this, but we do have requirements under our Marine Mammal Protection Act permit and in our monitoring plan to report any abandoned pups that are observed. So we ask everyone who's doing our pinniped monitoring to look for signs of abandonment. So if you see pups that have not had contact with any adult harbor seals, they haven't moved very much or at all. They attempt to nurse from females and their attempts are rebuffed. Those are some signs of abandonment. Um, we do not approach or move pups. We are not permitted to rescue any pups on the beach. Instead, please let Sonoma Water staff know. There's contact information on all of the data sheets. Um, so if you could report that the same day as your observation, we'll be able to report that to the National Marine Fisheries Service Stranding Network. So we make that report immediately upon notice. And then we also make reports to the National Marine Fisheries Service regional and headquarter offices as well. And then, so everyone, the volunteer monitors, our Sonoma Water staff monitors are collecting a lot of data through our monitoring plan. So that data is reviewed. So those data sheets that you'll be completing are reviewed by Andy and other staff and entered into our database, which is pretty extensive now. We've been monitoring for a really long time. And we use that data to evaluate the trends that will help us meet the goals and objectives of the Pinniped monitoring plan. And then we take that data, analyze it, and prepare an annual report of the results. And we distribute that to the National Marine Fisheries Service, California State Parks, the Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods, and then we post it on our website to make it available to the public. And occasionally we do get requests for this data from other entities or researchers, and so it's shared with those folks as well. And with that, I will stop my presentation and I'm happy to take a couple of questions. I know that was a lot to cover in a short time.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'm curious what happens if anything, to those abandoned pups ultimately, or are they left? to their own.
Do you want to answer that question, Andy? I think you had a wide range of experience.
Yeah, when possible, the volunteers coordinated with the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito will come and they take pups into their facilities for rehabilitation, kind of up and down the coast. There's maybe like 3 centers that can do rehab in California. And that is all dependent on their ability to access the pup without causing a disturbance and potentially disrupting other mom pup pairs at the same time. But that is something that they have, particularly during, pupping season. They do have volunteers, available to kind of get eyes on it and then coordinate with their experienced staff. So seals do end up injured, ill, or abandoned pups can end up in rehabilitation at their center, and then they're released back into the wild.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah,
I had a question.
I would just add about that real quick is that the Marine Mammal Center operates under permits very similar to what I described, the same kind of permits. So that's why Andy mentioned if they can rescue those pups if they don't cause a disturbance to the rest of the haul out. So there are times where they're not able to rescue that pup. That's been reported. Go ahead, Alan, please.
I had a question I typed over there in the notes section.
What's the relationship between pinniped counting and salmon growth? Do you mean the like?
Well,
our salmon. Okay, go ahead.
Are the number of pinnipeds on the shoreline an indication of the feed available in the estuary, or are they 2 independent things going on? In other words, you spent a lot of time talking about the salmon, which is great, but it's the first I've frankly heard of it.
Yeah, so I think that in terms of salmon growth and the availability of like prey for salmon, the fact that we do know that there is abundant prey for salmon in the estuary also helps indicate that there's healthy conditions for lots of different fish that utilize the estuary as a nursery or for adults. So I think the fish populations in the estuary, Russian River Estuary overall reflect that there's a healthy environment there for a lot of fish species. And the way that might be connected to the harbor seals and the haul out is that pinnipeds and harbor seals in particular prey on a variety of different types of fish species. So not just salmon. So they'll forage both in the estuary and in the ocean. So I think that reflects that healthy connection there. I know, Andy, if you want to talk a little bit about harbor seal diets.
Yeah, I think their previous investigations in the Russian River Estuary in particular have found that harbor seals will take advantage of locally abundant prey, and sometimes that can be young salmon. But typically their behavior is to forage in the nearshore environment, and it's more common that young harbor seals would use the estuary as a foraging ground because their capacity to dive is reduced compared to an adult-sized animal. So they're probably feeding on smaller fish in the estuary. You do, however, see both harbor seals and sea lions take advantage of the availability of large adult salmonid during their migration when they are constricted, particularly in the river mouth, and like making that transition to that environment. And yeah, so they will take advantage of that. It does take it takes a lot more effort for a harbor seal or a sea lion to capture an adult salmonid, however, and that prey is typically shared when caught among multiple individuals. So one fish might feed multiple adult harbor seals if it's an adult size salmon. Yeah. Yeah. But I think generally like trying to provide some context to like how Sonoma Water, like where we fit into monitoring pinnipeds in the estuary is related to our activities in the estuary and our requirements under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and like kind of providing context for how those two things fit together, because it's not always obvious when you say I work, at Sonoma Water and I study harbor seals. So that's kind of the nexus there. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question you're looking for.
Well, what I'm hearing you say is that the river mouth has many different advantages for harbor seals, fish, whatever. They aren't necessarily both related, but they are related to the river mouth itself, I guess. So, okay, well, that's fine. We don't have to spend more time on it.
Just say, generally estuaries, because they're such a dynamic environment, they do provide habitat for lots of different species.
Right.
So both freshwater species, species that are sort of uniquely adapted to that sort of changing brackish conditions, because salinity and really drives the conditions within an estuary that aquatic species in particular experience, but also marine mammals, or I mean, sorry, marine animals. Our fisheries monitoring has documented over 50 different fish species that utilize the Russian River Estuary, a number of invertebrates, and that's pretty typical for an estuarine habitat. Is that that dynamic condition really just provides a broad range of habitats for lots of different species.
Well, one of the reasons I ask is when you're out there doing it, a lot of people stop by and want to, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So the more information you have, the better
Yep.
you
Mm-hmm.
interact with people.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Well, thanks for the questions. I think we're ready. We'll get into some pinniped ID here. So I'm going to go over what to look for in terms of identifying who's on the beach, particularly some species that are not harbor seals that you may encounter less frequently. And then I'm going to give a brief summary on our monitoring results, kind of broadly and also more specifically from our most recent season of surveys. And then Sonoy is going to get into some detail about what it's like to do a survey. Yeah, so let's get started on that. Okay, so pinnipeds of Northern California, and what I mean by that is, let me see if I can find out how I advance my slide. There we go. Right, so there's different species that we can find. There's six pinniped species that we could find along our coast, including 4 species of odorheiid seals or eared seals, sea lions and fur seals. That's that group. And then there's the true seal or the phosid seal, which would be harbor seals and northern elephant seals here on our coast. So starting with our primary player here, the harbor seal. So they are a true seal, and what distinguishes them from the other group of sea lions would be that they don't have external ear flaps. So they have little holes where their ear flaps would be on the side of their head. And they also aren't able to rotate their hips under their body. So you'll see them always kind of laid out on their belly when they're on land, unlike a sea lion or a fur seal that can like have an upright posture. So that's like, at first glance, that can help you identify what you're looking at. Harbor seals are widely distributed. You can kind of see on the map those that turquoise shading shows everywhere where you can find a harbor seal. So pretty much along the coasts of the northern hemisphere, you can find a harbor seal. They can utilize rocky areas for haul outs, ice, sand, sandy beaches, subtidal mud flats, lots of diversity in the habitats that you can find them in. They're also, generalized predators. They don't focus on a particular species of prey, so they're very adapted to different environments because of those things. Males and females also are not very sexually dimorphic, meaning they have pretty much the same size. Males are a little bit bigger than females when they're adults. But you can't really tell them apart just by looking at them unless you get really close. And they can come in different color phases. So you've probably noticed that there are light, like blonde, silvery coats with dark spots on them, or they can be dark with silvery spots on them. And every pinniped will molt their fur at some point in the year. So when a harbor seal gets to the point of the year where their coat is about a year old, they might look uniformly tan or brown rather than silver or black with spots. So it can be harder to kind of notice what color phase they are. And they aren't migratory. So they do leave their resting areas and they can spend, a day or two at sea foraging during certain times of the year, but they don't, they might rest in some other places, but they have a primary area where they call home. And females in particular will come back to the same beaches to give birth year after year. So the next type of true seal that we could encounter on the coast is a northern elephant seal. And those of you familiar with the beaches in Point Reyes have maybe observed elephant seal breeding activity and the pupping that goes on there this time of year. So we do occasionally get animals that are probably straying from some of those larger haul outs here on the Russian River beach. But typically what we see are immature animals. So they might not, the male, an adult male will have a very prominent proboscis, which gives them their name, elephant seal. We would rarely see those age class individuals at Goat Rock, but it has happened in the past where a particular individual has repeatedly used the beach, but it's been many years since that has been observed. So elephant seals, they do migrate. So they spend an adult will spend a lot of time of the year off the beach and foraging and diving at depths up in the northern Atlantic seas, northern Pacific seas, sorry. Size is one of their biggest characteristics. They're quite a bit larger than a harbor seal. They have some other features that kind of set them apart too. They have very large dark eyes and they have black whiskers. There's some differences in the shapes of their flippers too. The thing that I find most notable when trying to pick them apart on our beaches is the behavior of flipping sand onto their backs. That's something that a harbor seal won't do, but elephant seals do very frequently. And I have some pictures here. I will just note that like in the They did a new census count for elephant seals a couple of years ago, and it showed an increase of about 10,000 for their California population from the previous survey, which was done in 2012. So here's some comparisons to help, because like I said, we will encounter younger age class elephant seals at the beach, and they can be hauled out in and among the harbor seals. So at first glance, it can be hard because a small subadult elephant seal can look similar in size to a large adult harbor seal. But they do have a little bit more of a nose. Their eyes are very big and dark, black whiskers, and that sand flipping behavior that I have kind of captured in the photo on the top will set them apart. So you definitely want to look for that and note that separately on the data sheet. And then this other sketch from a field guide kind of shows you the difference in size. So pretty dramatic. The next species that we have covered under our permit and that we're most likely to see on the beach is the California sea lion. So these are the ones that you see hauled out on the docks at Pier 39. They're the ones that you hear barking. So even if you don't see one on the beach, they might be swimming just offshore, especially when they're in their migratory period, and you can hear them barking. Or you might see them swimming in the estuary. They will come up on the beach and can be observed. They typically will not rest very close to where the harbor seals are. They tend not to hang out together too much. So you'll notice that an individual would be separate from the group. So the males are migratory, and they breed down in Southern California, primarily on the Channel Islands. So the females and the young animals will stay in and around the Channel Islands pretty much year round until the males are old enough to disperse. An adult male will migrate all the way up to Alaska and feed there during the wintertime, and then come back down to the southern coast of California and Baja in the summertime during the breeding season. So we often see them mostly during those migratory periods, and they can travel in big groups. So those are times when we might get individuals on the beach. Another time might be when an individual is undernourished or ill, and we'll see kind of individuals in bad shape resting on the beach. And those are something we would also report and call in to the stranding coordinators, and then let them take it from there. So if you see a sea lion that has, they tend to be thin, you can see their rib cage. They're not really moving around a whole lot. Those are the things you want to kind of look for. And then I have some to just give you some comparison and what you might be looking at from the overlook. So the top right photo is a group of juvenile sea lions hauled out in the estuary on one of the rock groups kind of in the middle of the estuary. And this was a period of time when there wasn't, the forage fish down in Southern California had kind of collapsed, and so sea lions were traveling farther to find food. The one on the left-hand side, that's an adult male on the youngish side. It doesn't have a fully adult male will have a sagittal crest, or like a top knot on their head. So they have like a forehead bump. So this is pretty good size, but no forehead bump. So that's a sea lion coming up and hanging out there where the harbor seals are temporarily. You can see that the flippers are strikingly different. We have long, dark flippers, and they use those for thermoregulation. So they'll wave them in the air to cool off, or expose them to the sun to warm up. And then we have a group of adult male sea lions on the bottom right. And you can see how they have that bump on their forehead. They tend to be much more gregarious and boisterous in their behavior when we see them, especially when they're swimming around. And here's some differences in their swimming patterns that you might notice. So harbor seals are pictured on the right-hand side and sea lions are on the left. Harbor seals are pretty discreet when they're swimming. They don't use their foreflippers for propulsion, but they undulate their body instead. Also with sea lions, you might see their foreflipper come out of the water, or they'll swim with their head out of the water, often barking at the same time. So I'm pointing out these, even though we aren't counting seals or sea lions in the water as part of our monitoring counts, but we do want to note when sea lions are present. So if you are doing a survey and you see or hear them in the water, you can mark that in the comment for the kind of the count time at which that's most relevant. But if they don't actually come ashore, then you would not record them as an animal on land. So I'm going to go over a few, 3 more species that we are not as likely to see, but are along the coast and are possible to see. And they're also important for us to note if they are present because, as Jessica pointed out, they are not covered under our permit. So any of our activities that we would normally be allowed to undergo, we would not be able to do if these 3 species were present on the beach. So one of them, a stellar sea lion, mostly they're distributed north of us, but there are some places where they've been found more regularly north of the coast of us in Mendocino and Humboldt counties. They look very similar to a California sea lion. Overall, same body shape, same flipper configuration with longer, darker flippers. Generally, they are bigger and I would say more stout. So they have more of a barrel chest. Their face is, I don't know, like their nose is a little more smashed in, like more like a bear than a dog, I guess, if you were to make a comparison there. And they do tend to have lighter fur, more of a blonde than a dark brown compared to a California sea lion. So if you're unsure, just take a photo and maybe make some notes about why it's not clearly a California sea lion. The next 2 I'm going to talk about are fur seals. They can be found in our area. They don't typically come ashore and rest along our part of the shore. They're both considered a pelagic species, which means they spend a lot of time out at sea rather than on shore, and they come to shore primarily for breeding and pupping. And because they spend so much time out at sea swimming, they don't dive terribly deep. They have really, really long flippers, and they're using those for their propulsion in the water. They also are lower in numbers than historically because, as their name might suggest, they have very lovely fur, and so they were hunted to near extinction before they became protected. So they do have a more luxurious furry coat of dark fur. They have a smaller, kind of pointier head. Like I said, their flippers are much longer, like comically long. And if they are ashore and they are cooling off their flippers, you'll kind of see like individual, toes that are wiggling around. It can be difficult to tell a northern fur seal apart from the next fur seal, which is a Guadalupe fur seal, because generally fur seals have a very similar body type. they have a longer snout and their flippers are not quite as long, which doesn't mean a lot if you don't have another fur seal to compare them to. So I would say generally anything that falls into the category of could be a fur seal is something you want to take a picture of and send along to me. But in some of these images, I'll try to point out one of the key features that can distinguish the two species of fur seals is how the fur extends onto their foreflipper. And I'll try to point it out here. I can figure out how to do a little pointer thingy. Anyway, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but in the top left photo, the fur extends past basically what would be the wrist of the flipper into a point on a Guadalupe fur seal. And a northern fur seal, the fur cuts straight across at the wrist. So those are just kind of the basic highlights for identifying these different species. Typically, if we're seeing a fur seal, it's either because they just are taking a brief rest from their long time at sea, or they're not feeling so great and they've been spending more time closer to shore. So we would definitely kind of want to get some more eyes on that. And I know people at the Marine Mammal Center and other folks statewide would be interested in those observations. So, take pictures. We do provide ID material in your packets when you go out. So you do have other references, plus this slideshow is available. Right. So here's an example of a California sea lion that's not really presenting a lot of its features, but it's an animal that was kind of staying in one place during the whole survey. And upon closer inspection, it was identified as a sea lion that looked to be undernourished. And then on the right here, we have kind of adjacent to the harbor seal haul out, an elephant seal that's similar size to our harbor seals, but is doing that like sand flipping behavior that set them apart pretty easily. We talked about pups already. I will just say that, there's a period of time where pups are born, happens throughout April and May. They're with their moms for about a month before they're weaned. But they're very precocial. So a harbor seal pup can swim right away after birth. And they often do go into the water with their mom right away. So we'll talk a little bit. Let's see, I think I have some more photos on ID. Yeah. So here's some different features for identifying different ages of pups. We do want to record pups that are neonates or less than a week old, and pups a week or older in age, because it helps us to do a total pup count for the season. So neonate will have an umbilicus, or their belly button, still visible, and that only helps if you can see their stomach, obviously. You will notice that they aren't as filled out. They haven't really had much to eat yet. And so they're wrinkly along their abdomen rather than being kind of plump like a football. Both cases, pups and neonates should be associated with a female. So at some point during your observations, you'll notice them either nursing or nuzzling or vocalizing with an adult female. They do provide a very high quality, high fat milk for their pups. So pups do grow pretty quickly. And so within those 7 days, they'll fill out. You don't see them kind of with the wrinkly folds along their abdomen anymore. Yeah, so those are some good features there. These show different ages of pups here, and these are some of the things you might be faced with in in your monitoring and trying to figure out. I will say that all of these are pups. And rather than do my little quiz that I normally do in the interest of time, we're just going to talk about what we're seeing. So in photo A, you have a very young pup in between two adults. It's very fuzzy, it's very skinny, and it has wrinkly folds. In photo B, you have two individuals that are almost the same size, but the one on the right is a pup. It is still, prodding the female for nursing. It has a brand new coat of fur. It's just very close to being weaned and has gained quite a bit of mass in that time that it's been with its mom. Photo C, we have a pup that's nursing. And because I can't see any other features to that pup, I'm not going to try to classify it as a neonate. I would just record it as a pup. So the general rule is if you don't see characteristics that classify a pup as a neonate or less than 7 days old, then record it as a pup. Now, maybe that is a younger animal if we could see its abdomen. But since we don't know, but we do know it's a pup, we'll record it as such. Photo D, I definitely know that that pup is a neonate because the mom still has like a bloody rump from the afterbirth. So that's a tip off. You might get the opportunity to see some live births when you're doing the monitoring, which is very exciting and very fun. But female harbor seals are very subtle. They often just kind of remove themselves a little bit from the group, give birth, and it's the seagulls or the crows that will let you know that a birth has happened before much else gets noticed. But definitely something we can start looking for as early as mid-March. Okay, that was a lot. Also, I have a little bit more to go over with my other slides here. Does anybody have any quick questions on ID before I move on? Okay, I'm just going to jump right in. I want to leave plenty of time for Sonoy. So Jessica mentioned the history of our program. We've been doing this formally with the Stewards since about 2009. So we've been able to engage with a lot of community volunteers. That's what makes this program possible and all this data that we're able to collect. This is a plot that shows harbor seal abundance from last year's surveys. So we do have that season from March to October where we're monitoring, and we can see that as we enter into, pupping, numbers start to go up. We see highest counts and abundance in June and July, and then it kind of drastically reduces from there. This coincides with the time of year when those harbor seals are getting their new coat of fur, and they tend to spend more time on land during their molt. And also, females and pups are still together, and the females will breed after they wean their pups. And so you have a reason for males and females all to be hanging out in the same area for a period of time until they've been bred. And then both males and females are going to spend some time at sea spending more time foraging, which is contributing to the lower numbers we see on land after July. And these patterns that we saw last year are very typical to what we see over many years. So this is just a plot that has that same data set, but from 2010 to 2020. So in all but a handful of years, we see a similar peak in abundance in June and July, and then a reduction in numbers beginning in the fall. So things that can influence the amount of seals on land. So when I say seal abundance, I mean harbor seals resting on shore. When we count fewer harbor seals on shore, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've completely left the area. But it could also indicate that they aren't spending as much time on land. So we know that we do see patterns in how they haul out and relative to time of day. So when we have the summer months when we have lots of seals, and the fall where we have very few seals, there tends to be not so much an effect of the hour of day. But when but in the spring and the winter, the haul out tends to build in size as the day goes on until about mid-afternoon. And this is a typical pattern that you would see for a group of seals that was spending time foraging at night or in the evening and then resting during the day. Tide height can also influence the number of seals on land because it reduces the amount of space, and the seals tend not to haul out when there's wave overwash that kind of comes over from the ocean into the estuary. But it takes a pretty high tide to see that effect. So anything up to 5 feet of tide height might not have an impact, but above 5 feet, you can see a reduction in the amount of seals on land. We also see the strongest effect when it comes to whether the river mouth is open or closed. Seals at Goat Rock definitely show a strong preference for an open river mouth condition. They have full access to the beach during a closure because they can still come to shore and they can scooch over the beach to get to the estuary and then back to the ocean. And you can observe them doing that during a closure. But we definitely see more seals when it's open, when they have full egress and have a river mouth channel that they can navigate. So over time, we have a pretty consistent number of harbor seals using Goat Rock State Beach. So these are counts of harbor seals on land during the period of time where we see most of them. So June and July over the past 15 years. And the line that is cutting across the graph is showing the 14-year average. So it's a way to compare what happened in 1 year given to the average of all of that whole data set. So in 2024, we had a much lower number compared to the year prior and the year after. And based on some further analysis, that also coincided with a year where there was a period of time during that June and July where the river mouth was closed. So we know that seals show a preference for an open river mouth condition. So even in the period of the year where they're more likely to be on land, their numbers are reduced when the river mouth is closed. Pupping is another way, like counting pups year to year is another way we can look at the overall health of the population and population size utilizing the rookery at Goat Rock. And again, pretty consistent numbers for most years. The height of the bar represents our maximum number of pups we counted in a given year, and the diamond in the middle is the average. I like to use the maximum number of seals because average tends to be an underestimate, but you can see how trends and averages are pretty consistent across years. We also are recording disturbances, so that's another thing that we report. So just looking at the last few years of data, kind of summarizing that, we know that during our baseline surveys, seals are recorded being disturbed on just about half of those surveys. People, is the primary cause, other people using the beach. So people on land, 31% of surveys, disturbances were recorded. And second to that would be people on kayaks. So I will say that compared to other places and in talking with people that are monitoring harbor seals and like in Point Reyes and down in the Channel Islands, seals at Goat Rock are pretty habituated to human presence, but they are still disturbed by humans when they get too close. But the third most common source of disturbance is actually birds. They do share the beach with a number of bird species, and this I looked into it a little bit, and it seems to be more commonly recorded when there are young seals on the beach too. So I think over time, I'm sorry, my cats are fighting. Over time, harbor seals kind of learn to not be as disturbed by the birds. But anyway, that is another thing. So their natural kind of egress is to get into the water, and that's what we kind of record as a disturbance. We also do record disturbances related to Sonoma Water's activities, including breaching. And as you would expect, when we put equipment and people on the beach where the haul out is, we would create a disturbance. And that happened in 92% of the surveys. Sometimes seals just are not present when that happens, and so they don't get disturbed. And we can see that after the river mouth is open, we do get an increase in the number of harbor seals. So on our post-breaching monitoring, there's consistently a greater number than prior when the river mouth is closed. Okay, any questions about that? I just want to say too that like the data that you are all collecting contributes to kind of the statewide information. They did a statewide census in 2024. They did like a flyover of California. We don't have the results for that yet, and by they I mean National Marine Fisheries Service under NOAA does those. And so they're trying to get a population census for harbor seals because some places have noticed a decline. And particularly Point Reyes, there's some haulouts where they've really noticed a decline in harbor seals. We haven't observed the same decline that they have here at Goat Rock. But these places where people have long-term data sets like we do with the stewards here will help provide information when they go to evaluate like the overall population numbers. And it's going to provide context because they're only flying these surveys maybe every 10 years. And so there's a lot of gaps that can be filled in with these data sets of people, consistently counting seals year after year. So, all of this is like contributing to that effort, which I think is really cool. So if there aren't questions on that, I'm going to kick it over to Sonoy, and she is going to talk about monitoring, like broad strokes monitoring protocols, keeping in mind that we'll get further in depth when we do an in-person training.
Sonoy, for some reason, I'm not hearing your sound. I don't know if anyone else is.
All right. How was that? Okay, perfect. Great. Well, thank you, Andy, and hello, everyone. My name's Sonoy Deaver. I am one of the technicians with Sonoma Water, and I will be helping out with Pinniped monitoring. And I've been doing it I did for 2 seasons now. And if you have helped out last year or previous time, you most likely see me up at the Jenner Outlook. Um, and so this little slideshow here, just kind of want to go briefly through the data sheets. Again, quick overview. We'll have a more in-depth training with a hands-on experience next week. Um, And I do see some new volunteers, so that's awesome. I did want to mention if you did participate last year, I see Harriet, Heidi in here. Maybe put your name in the chat. It would be a good idea, to have a monitoring partner out there. If your name is on there, maybe you sign up and, find a name that's done it before, and just so you know, you have a field partner. It's nice to kind of cooperate, collaborate with what you are seeing. Um, okay, let's get into it. Um, Just a little bit repeat. Here's our monitoring schedule. 4-hour shifts during the week, daylight hours. During the regular season, March to October, is our baseline surveys, 2 days a month. It is, shared between Sonoma Water staff and the Steward volunteers. During the pupping season, we increased that. During April and May, we'll be out there once a week. The monitoring is the same during that time frame. Um, and this is, a great opportunity for us to get out there during the most fun time. We get to see the pups. Really exciting. And you'll get a lot if you're out. If you go once a week or try to get twice a month, you'll get really good experience recognizing the characteristics between other species and neonates versus pups. So it's really fun. And then beach management monitoring. These surveys are scheduled as needed. Like Andy and Jessica mentioned, it could be when the river mouth closes or we need to do some kind of beach management like the breaching. This is when we would ask for volunteers to help out with that monitoring. There could be so the day before, and a post, so the day after the surveys, where we conduct the surveys just like a baseline survey. Again, these are as needed, and sometimes we don't get much notice, so they're often scheduled with shorter notice. Um, we just kind of send a request to see if anyone is available. All right, next. So here is our first data sheet. All right, again, 4-hour shifts. We like to start our day 8 o'clock, end our day at 4 o'clock. So we kind of keep it consistent. We try to complete a 4-hour shift block within that time frame. We do our surveys during the weekdays because, that is the most consistent for our longstanding data set that we have. Also weekend conditions are definitely different than the weekdays, with increased visitors, different activities going on. So weekdays, you know, during the daytime. Um, so example of our monitoring data sheet here, where this is where we will be doing majority or all of our observations for your shift. Um, Oops, sorry. Moving on. First, we'll enter our general information. Oh, I still have Andy's name in there. And date, your name. If there's 2 or 3 of you, enter everyone's name. In the header there, what type of survey are we doing for, what observations are we recording, your start time, your end of your survey. Is the river mouth open? Is it closed? We also record the conditions on the beach, air temperature, wind direction there. We will be providing instruments to help you record that. And let's see, also recording our precipitation. Was it rainy? Was it foggy? Those things will help us determine how easy or hard it was for you to make observations on that lookout point that day. If was it super stormy, did it really hinder your observations? So it's just, general information there at the top. Once you complete that, we'll want to know. Let's move on to, I think, next one here. Who's on the beach? Once you complete your little header, who's on the beach. This is when I take our binoculars or the spotting scope, give the beach a good scan. We just want to make sure you can see the whole beach from your lookout parking position. There are different lookout areas up there. If I start in one spot and I can't see maybe off to the right, you can actually pick up your location or your vehicle and drive up to the next pullout. Maybe you'll have a better visualization of the entire beach because you really want to be able to see left to right all the way down, just to make sure you're not missing anything. The harbor seals are usually hauled out in multiple groups, so I'll try to get a sense of how many groups are out there. And at this point, I'll give the beach a quick sketch. So I'll just turn over my data sheet and just kind of show, where the river, the mouth of the position is. I'll circle the groups of seals that I see hauled out. I'll give them a letter. I'll add the jetty there if you can see the jetty, even over to Haystack Rock on there on the right. And this is just a good reference for you, for us. Add anything noteworthy. It really is just a general glimpse of what you can see, at the overlook from where you are. All right, back at the data sheet, this is where we're gonna start our counts. So, yep, fill that in, and here we go. So, your start time there at the top can be, different from your count timer when you start. Maybe you are still setting up, um, and depending on how many groups of seals, maybe breaking them up in the sites are helpful. So we'll start with group A here, and you do a quick scan of the beach and at the time frame, was the visibility at the bottom of our data sheets, as you'll see, it'll give us a little notes. Visibility 1, you are able to see everything. Visibility 2, was it maybe obstructed by some fog or the haystack rock is kind of obscuring your view. Um, and yeah, based up, moving on to number of pups. Let's see, number of non-pups and then number of pups. So here, there are two types of pups. You either got the neonates or the pups greater than 7 days old. As we mentioned earlier, the pupping seasons March through the end of June, and that's when we will be using this column to record the pups. Outside of those months, you have that little column there for all other seals. They're recorded right there in that number, NO, so number of non-pups. If there are other species out there, then we can use this column here to record what you observed. What species? Can you tell if they're male or female out there? Refer back to the species identification cards and look at the characteristics. There will be a binder that you have, and you'll have those pictures to refer to. And then again, remember, we're also only recording counts for animals on the land. Um, if you see a California sea lion out there in the water, you can record it in the comments section to the right. Um, but all the data that we will be recording are for the animals on land, including the harbor seals. You don't need to count any harbor seals that are swimming in the water. Yeah, let's see here. So for each beach site, you will add up the total number of pinnipeds and you'll add the total right there. And also, you will be recording the number of people on the beach near each site. Um, we like to record how many people, get closer to the specific haul out of where those harbor seals are. We're really interested in if the people are getting, close to that jetty, getting closer to the hollow areas on the estuary side, north, north of the jetty towards Haystack Rock, and towards the estuary side more than the ocean side. So Yeah, from there, you just every half hour, every 30 minutes for your 4-hour shift, you'll just do your counts for every beach site. Let's see here. Okay, it looks like another review of the neonate ID. Again, neonates are observed, with a female. They'll still have their umbilicus attached, have wrinkly skin, awkwardly moving, like Jessica and Andy mentioned. Their waists will be thin. Sometimes you'll observe the afterbirth near them, or observe the mother still bleeding, as that's that picture there to the right. As for the pups, they'll be, associated with the female as well. They could be nursing, they could be vocalizing. Um, Most times they would be perpendicular in position. Once they're weaned, you don't really need to count them as pups. You can see them all hanging as in a group of other young seals. And those guys we like to call young of the years. But not pups. And they'll be recorded under the number of non-pups. Also take photos. We love photos. You will be provided with a digital camera. Um, we ask volunteers to capture where the seals are. This is an addition to the drawing. Take pictures. It's a digital camera. We can always delete them. Don't be afraid to take pictures. This is also, if you have a concern or if you have questions of a species, take a picture. Great opportunity. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, this is doing counts for every 30 minutes, but in between those 30 minutes, this is when we get to record our disturbances. This is the other data sheet we will be working with. Um, so using your binoculars or spotting scope in between that 30-minute counts, this is what we will be recording is the disturbances. You'll be watching the beach and the seals to see if there's anything or any of the seals are being disturbed and how are they being disturbed. So 3 categories here that we will record. First is the alert. It's when you see seals just like lift their head and look around uh, towards a person, towards a kayak, and like Andy mentioned, birds. So that's an alert. And the second category here is a move. This is their movement from their resting spot or them just, scooching over to a disturbance. And then lastly is the flush. So, that's, completely leave their haul out spot, end up in the estuary or even in the ocean because of a disturbance. So we just want to tally here. And how often they respond to the according to what the disturbance is. So again, fill out your top, uh, which activity it is, species of pinniped, adult, juvenile, pup, or neonate, um, for age groups here. And you will need to fill out more than one data sheet based on who's on the beach. Uh, Specifically, we would want to separate the pup disturbances and the non-pup disturbances. If there are other species being disturbed, like a California sea lion or elephant seals, you just want to start another data sheet according to what species we're going to be recording. And you will have um, lots of data sheets, and we'll make sure that you guys have lots of copies of the data sheets. So fill it out. Just when in doubt, fill it out. More information for us to go through is totally fine. Let's see here. Yep. So that, just a tally mark. People on the beach. It was an alert. Um, Next, a flush tally. So, people on the beach, maybe they got close to one of the sites. Um, this data sheet really helps us determine the source of the disturbance and how frequently, are they occurring in that category. And then use the comment section. It's a great way to write down, what you saw for us. It'll help us understand or, set the scene of the disturbance. So more tallies, more comments. Again, just as they occur, tally your, make tallies on your sheet. All right, next slide. Really quick, report injuries of injured pinnipeds. Andy did cover a little bit about this, but as Jessica mentioned, part of our requirement is to report any injuries or strandings that we see. And it does not have to be related to any human interactions. These reports can occur during any time of the year. If you are up there at the Jenner Outlook and you observe something, we have these forms, and you can fill them out as they occur. If it is a live stranded animal, we would contact the Marine Mammal Center, as Andy mentioned, and give them pertinent information. So it's just give a good description of where they are on the beach, what is around them. It's really helpful for the center if they need to actually send someone out. So you can be detailed, set the scene of situation. Um, if the center staff they also have the limitations, just like I think Andy, you did mention this, on how they can disturb seals also. They have the same permits. As for injuries, there is a number of different injuries. Not all of them need to be reported. Two photos here. In this top one, it looks, like a shark bite there. These reports, they could provide data that's used as a resource to monitor what's going on in the area and could be valuable to someone, that is actually studying sharks. So we would write up a report, get a photo, fill out the form with as much information as you can, and then we'll receive that and go from there. Some injuries are more common, like this bottom photo here, scrapes and scratches, especially around the face during breeding season. These injuries, we really do not need to report. It's not really necessary or something that's threatening to their well-being. It's just part of their normal life, out there fighting for food and their own ground. But if you are concerned, try to get a photo, fill out the form, and we can absolutely pass it along. And let's see here. Okay, so that was really quick. I know that was really quick. We will cover a lot of this and go in depth for sure next week at our in-person session. And this is when I'll be up there. I could walk you through really detailed on how to fill out these data forms. So, our next training will be in person, February 18th. 10 to 12. Lisa will absolutely make sure everyone is aware of when to be there. Um, and we'll just continue this training. And we'll do everything, Lisa will mention that we'll meet at the visitor center. We'll get a good orientation down there, and then move on up to the Jenner Outlook, and we can answer way more questions up there and get some hands-on experience. Um, so that is the end of my slideshow there. And I think if we have any questions.
If anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute.
Oh, no.
I just want to say just thank you. That was just like such amazing, really in-depth presentations, and it's really it's really useful getting all that deep scientific information, and that this recording will be available to all of you so you can go back. I know I learned something new every time I go through one of these trainings, and there's new information. So once we're done and I have the recording posted, I will send it out to everyone. And does anyone have any questions? Okay, well, we just have a couple more minutes left, and we'll just, I was going to let Bet just say a couple words about becoming a volunteer.
Thank you, Lisa, and many thanks to our presenters and to all of you current volunteers and potential volunteers. We appreciate your help with this important citizen science program. I will be in touch with you with regard to those of you who are not volunteers to onboarding and how we can get that accomplished. When volunteering, you're volunteer for California State Parks as well as the Stewards of the Coast and Redwoods. And Elise, who had to leave a bit early, she had a previous appointment. Between the two of us, we will help you with your onboarding and make that process as smooth as possible for you. And again, I will be in touch. I will follow this up and get paperwork in good order for you so that you're ready to start the season. And again, my thanks to Lisa for hosting and our presenters for all the information they shared and for current and future volunteers. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bet. There's just, I'm just going to mention that there will be a calendar that gets set up for the season. It's not up yet. And there's a process around that, and you would get that information by email if you become a volunteer. And just the reason that we're meeting at the Jenner Visitor Center is that we have the Pinniped equipment that's stored there. And that's the spotting scopes, that's all the binder with all the paperwork and the clipboards and things for recording the data on, and camera, just everything you need is there. And we'll show you how to get into that. Obviously, if you can't make it to the in-person, there are lots of opportunities to help train with people. And so when we send out that calendar, people will mention whether they are willing to help train people. And so you can hop on a shift with someone else, and then just you may decide that you want to keep monitoring as part of a group, and that works really well as well. And I did want to ask, I do see that there's a storm coming in next week, and Sonoma Water friends, can you tell us how we'll decide about that?
I did think about that this morning, Lisa. Thanks for bringing it up. I will say, if it's a drizzle, then we'll go ahead with it. But if the conditions are like rainy, stormy, then I think we'll need to reschedule that in-person training because there's just, it's not conducive to learning, I think, for in a group setting. That being said, if you are scheduled for a baseline survey and it rains, like there's a certain point that we would kind of want you to try to monitor up to, and then when it becomes like you can't see anything and it's too windy and it's raining too heavily, then you would stop your survey at that point, and then just let us know so we can decide if we want to reschedule it, if we're just going to accept like a truncated survey. So that's typically how it works. If we know ahead of time, we can often work around it, and there is some flexibility in like how what days the baseline surveys are conducted on, so you can you have the potential to kind of pick a sunnier day. Yeah. So sorry I don't have a definitive, but like so far we're gonna, until I can get a more accurate forecast, it's still scheduled for the 18th.
Sounds good. So we'll update you if it looks like we need to make a change.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. Thank you all so much for coming, and we hope to see you at Jenner or in the season ahead. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.